I was flossing the morning sunlight out of my kitchen window blinds when the mail slipped through the slot and landed with its gentle paper sigh. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that knew my routine better than I did. Kettle on. Toast up. Phone face down. I liked the quiet first, coffee second, then the day. That order kept me steady. The white envelope was from the bank, the kind they only print for people who still trust paper. I do. Paper skirts excuses. It doesn't forget passwords or crash and lose the page you were about to understand. It doesn't buzz or ding or demand. It simply sits there, asking to be opened. When I sliced the envelope with my nail, I wasn't expecting betrayal. I expected a neat list of groceries I hadn't bought and cabs I never took, and the satisfaction of not seeing them. My name, Aveline Norcross, was printed across the top of the statement, ink steady and factual. There is something about your own name in serif font that feels like a mirror. The numbers looked wrong immediately. My eyes snagged on withdrawals I didn't recognize, 3 debits to Sunfield Recovery, a clinic across town I've never visited, a clutch of small, time transfers to an account ending in 9407, an ATM cash pull from a machine near the old footbridge where we used to feed ducks as kids. One of the debits was posted at 5:09 a.m. on a Sunday I'd been home asleep, the month already painted with early dawn and migrating geese. For a moment I heard my own breath the way you hear an appliance keeping the house alive. Then the room sharpened, like mountains seen after fog. I leaned against the counter and slid down till the tile cooled the backs of my calves. The bank statement lay across my lap where the toast crumbs had just been. Numbers are clean until they're not. Mine had been smudged by someone else's fingers. I took in the smell of burnt crushed, the kettle's soft pre-boil tremor. I waited for a sensible explanation to present itself, like a late train finally easing into view. I live alone. I don't share a card. My online banking requires two-factor that arrives to my phone. I had never given out my passcode, not even to my sister. My sister. The thought broke across the surface like a fish's back. Iris had stayed with me 2 weekends ago. She said the apartment above hers was being fumigated and all her clothes smelled like poison. She'd arrived with a plastic tote and the grief of a recent breakup, wearing the kind of face that made me stir a pot of soup and say, "Stay as long as you need." She borrowed my favorite sweater and forgot to return it. On the second night she fell asleep on the sofa to a show about home renovations and woke with a bad dream about falling through unfinished floors. She cried into my shoulder. I made tea and watched her from the kitchen doorway, the soft blue light of the TV washing across her face. I didn't think Iris would steal. I didn't think she wouldn't either. She is a person made of hot corners and tender alibis, beautiful in a way that rearranges the air and always a half step from an apology she means, until she doesn't. I texted the bank's fraud line and got a bot that sounded like a cheerful receptionist who'd never met a crime. I called and sat in the maze, press 3, press 1, press your patience against your teeth. While I waited, I spread the pages across the table and traced each debit with a pen, this one, this one, this one, like touching bruises to understand their shape. "Thank you for waiting, Ms. Norcross," a human voice finally said, soft, practiced. "Let me verify a few details." We went through the motions. Yes, the card ending in 2211. No, I did not authorize a transfer to account 9407. No, I don't know a person named M. Elridge, who, according to the memo line, received a Zelle payment at 11:32 p.m. last Thursday. While the representative placed me on a brief hold, a gull passed the window and threw a quick, crooked shadow over my sink. "I see that the transactions share a device fingerprint that isn't associated with your profile," she said when she returned. "It appears a mobile device was added to your account 2 weeks ago. The same night there was a login from your home IP and then another from a different IP we can't verify. We'll open a fraud case and freeze the card. Do you want us to freeze the entire account?" I did. She read me a case number that felt like a new last name, and I wrote it by the coffee ring where the mug had rested too long. When the call ended, the apartment exhaled and left me with the sound of the kettle cooling. A bus sighed to a stop outside. Somewhere a dog barked twice and decided the world was safe. I set the statement aside and stared at the sweater Iris had borrowed, draped over the back of a chair like a well-intended apology that never found its way home. Something in me, something raised on the rules of our childhood, kept asking for a kinder explanation. But the numbers, lined up like soldiers in a light gray battalion, were steady and dull and told the truth the way arithmetic always does. Iris loved me. Iris needed money. I had money. I don't know if the syllogism holds in a courtroom, but in my kitchen it landed with the weight of a chair pulled from under a standing person. I washed my cup and turned it upside down to dry. I folded the statement in thirds and slid it into my notebook. And then I took the first clean breath of the morning, which tasted like steam and the precise salt of panic, and told myself, quietly, the only sentence that mattered: find the proof that reveals the shape of what happened. The savings wasn't a mountain. It was a patient hill I'd carried one pocket of dirt at a time. Every paycheck, a small shovel. Every side gig, another handful. I had named it in my head, the house fund. Not a mansion, not a rooftop terrace with a skyline view, just a little two-bedroom in a part of town where the trees are older than the houses and the porches have worn steps that remember each neighbor by their tread. It wasn't only a home I was building. It was an apology to myself for years I had shared cramped rentals and thin walls and the diplomacy of sticky notes on fridges. It was stability I could touch. When my father passed, I inherited his coffee tin full of screws, rust on rust, thread stripped and mismatched, which he used to keep in the garage. Someday you'll know which ones fit where, he liked to say, as though hardware was a language you could learn through life alone. What was at risk now wasn't just cash. It was that promise, made quietly to the girl I used to be. It was my name in serif at the top of a mortgage application, my keys on a ring that only I carried. It was the idea that security could be earned and stored and not pulled out from under you while you slept. I spent the afternoon auditing my life like it belonged to a stranger. I checked my email and found a message I'd missed, spam folder, 3 days ago, telling me my mobile device had been successfully added to my account. If I had missed that nudge, what else had slipped by in the daily river? I picture myself then as a woman waving from the bank while her own purse floats past, her name bobbing on the leather tag. Iris and I are 2 years apart and 8 cities different. We grew up sharing a room and a secret map of the ceiling, tracing the cracks into rivers we named for our crushes and teachers. She liked to collect pretty problems. I liked to fix what I could and put the rest in a drawer labeled later. After college we unspooled. She moved into a life that always had more glitter than glue. I chose glue. It would be easier, I thought, if it were anyone else. A stranger. The boy I dated last winter who believed every silence was a judgment. A coworker who used a public spreadsheet like a confessional. But all my instincts stacked into one shape and spelled Iris. I walked around the block until my lungs loosened. The maple leaves along Addison Street were turning like a set of scene changes, one tree burnished copper, one lemon bright, one still green as if it had decided to be stubborn. I wanted to commit a small kindness to someone just to remember how. I wanted someone to hand me permission to be angry. Inside, I opened my safe, no drama, just a heavy shoebox disguised as a dictionary, and pulled out the file folder with my important documents. My father's will. My birth certificate. A thick manila pocket labeled house fund, down payment. In it, my timeline, my math, my private cheerleading in tidy black letters. I had a plan for 5% down by spring. I had lists of neighborhoods, lists of houses with addresses I drove past like a person rereading a favorite paragraph on her way home. I spread the documents and the bank statement across the table. They didn't argue, paper never does. They just lie there and keep being true. The phone rang. Iris. As though the universe had decided to walk in and set the clock on the mantel back to 0. I let it go to voicemail and listened, thumb hovering, while the machine soaked up her words. Lena's rehab won't take her without the deposit, she said, voice soft and braided with hope. They say Sunfield Recovery won't hold the bed past tomorrow. I've got some cash but not enough and I'm out of time. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I've been so ashamed. Lena. Our cousin. We'd grown up in a cousin swarm of 6, all knees and elbows, and shared birthdays and summer lemonade stands where we made more sugar water than money. Lena had always been the quiet one, the kind of kid who forgot to take the staples out of construction paper before she tried to tape it to a wall. A few years ago she drifted into pills after a car accident and could never find still water again. Rehab. The word made the Sunfield charges ring differently in my ears. But good intentions have been the cover story for so many wrongs that I no longer accept them as a passport. I called her back and kept my voice level. Tell me everything. Iris cried. She cried the way she always did when shame met audience, quietly at first, then with a storm that made you want to hand her a dry towel and a promise. Lena needed a bed. The clinic wanted a deposit. Iris's on-again off-again job at the salon had gone off again, and her car had decided to angrily require 4 new tires. She said she was going to ask me for a loan, and when she came to stay she'd almost asked, but she hated herself for needing me again. Iris, I said, did you take money from my account? The silence on the line was the kind that pulls paint from walls. She didn't hang up. I heard her draw in a breath and choose a path. I added my phone to your account while I was staying there, she said. Just so I could transfer it and put it back, Avenue. I was going to put it back as soon as Mom's annuity hits next week. I swear. Lena's detox was bad and they wouldn't let her stay without the deposit and I didn't know what else to do and you had that money just sitting there. It wasn't sitting, I said, my throat tightening. It was building. I know. She sniffed. I'm sorry. I panicked. Please don't hate me. Hate felt too big for our history. But love was not a permission slip. I'm closing the account and filing a fraud claim, I said, steady. I want you to understand that this is where the apology ends and the consequences begin. She didn't beg. She has never been a beggar. She is a storyteller, and good stories can almost pass for receipts. I'll fix it, she said. Just, please, don't call the police. If you do that, I lose my lease. I lose everything. I'll lose Lena, too. We'll see what the bank says, I answered, because sometimes the only safe sentence is the one you can stand behind later. After we hung up, I sat with the weight of it. The house fund had become a dam holding back a river that finally found a crack. What I risked losing wasn't a number but the faith that my life belonged to me. I would need more than a phone call and a sister's tears to heal that. I put the documents back in their folder, slid the folder into the safe, and pressed my palm against the top for a second as though blessing it. Outside, the bus pulled away and left behind a blue hush. I had a case number. I had names on paper. I had a sister who'd said the thing out loud. Now I needed a proof that could stand without me holding it up. I go looking for truth the way some people go looking for antiques, slowly, with a hand trained to recognize unadvertised value. I'm an office manager at a small architecture firm where drawings can cost as much as cars, and the only way to prevent chaos is paper. Paper backs you up even when you fall. I started with the bank. I booked an appointment at a branch that still believes in whispers across mahogany counters and showed up with a folder under my arm like a person who knows the center of gravity of her own life. The banker's name tag said Maria in clean block letters. She listened. She didn't push the sympathetic tilt too hard, I liked her immediately. "Show me where it started," she said, and I spread the statements in order so that the first unauthorized transaction sat like a dropped stitch in the pattern. Her finger, manicured and practical, followed the dates. "The mobile device added on the 13th, she murmured. She clicked a private screen and frowned gently. "We can see the device ID. It's an iPhone. The nickname is Iris's phone." There it was, truth served on letterhead. She printed the device access history, and the paper came warm from the machine, carrying the faint chemical perfume of fresh toner. She circled the device nickname and slid the page into a transparent sleeve as though to keep the lie from smudging. Maria stood and disappeared into the back, then returned with a security officer, a woman with sensible shoes and a nurse's patience. "We'll also need you to file a police report," the officer said. "Not because we don't believe you, but because the system believes documents. Once we have the report, we can freeze and attempt to reverse the transfers. The Sunfield charges may be more complicated, their services rendered. But the transfers to the 9407 account and the Zelle payment to M. Elridge can be challenged." "Who is Elridge?" I asked. They both shrugged the way professionals do when they're careful not to guess. I crossed the street to the precinct where the air always smells faintly like damp uniforms and disinfectant. The officer at the desk typed slowly, asking me questions that sounded like captions to a photo we were making together. When she slid the printed report across to me, the words, "alleged fraud by family member," built the kind of sentence that makes the floor learn your weight. On my way home, I stopped at Sunfield Recovery, a flat-roofed building with an optimistic fountain out front and posters in the lobby telling a kinder story than the waiting room chairs could. I asked for an administrator and waited, watching two men argue in whispers about the weather. The administrator, a woman named Tansy who wore a cardigan the color of patience, ushered me into a small office that smelled like tea. "I'm not asking for confidentiality details," I began, only to understand what was charged in my name. She studied my statement, the dates, the memo lines. "Deposits," she said. "Non-refundable after 24 hours. We have to reserve the bed, it's part of our intake policy." "For who?" I asked. She glanced up, compassionate and tired. "Our records say Lena Norcross." "My cousin," I said, and I felt that sentence land somewhere between anger and relief. At least the story had a person. At least the cousin in need was not a phantom my sister had invented to buy herself an alibi. Back home, I opened the junk drawer, the one every household has, where lives go to tangle. Batteries. Rubber bands. Old notepads with one useful page and 20 meandering lists of things already done. In the back, behind a bag of felt pads for chair legs, I found a notary receipt. Not mine. Iris's. Folded, it looked like a ticket caught mid-confession. When I opened it, I saw a date that matched the first device edition on the bank logs and a description, power of attorney, financial, partial, notarization. The air went thin in my lungs. If she'd faked a power of attorney. But the name of the notary was there, the stamp clear, the number listed. I called it and got a woman named Paulette, who remembered Iris perfectly. Friendly girl, very insistent that her sister was present but had to step out to take a call, she said. I refused to notarize without both signatures. She left in a huff. "Thank you," I whispered. Some part of me wanted to drive to Paulette with a basket of muffins and the gratitude of a person who has been saved from a fate that would have taken more than a fraud case to unwind. The last piece was M. Elridge. For that, I called a friend who wasn't exactly a friend. Owen designs our firm's website and takes lunch at his desk with the intensity of a person running for a train that only he can see. He has a talent for finding public information and a willingness to wink at the fence between public and private. "Do you know anyone named Elridge?" I asked. "Only a cat," he said. "Why?" "Someone with that name received money from my account. I gave him the email and the Zelle confirmation line. He didn't ask if I wanted to know. He simply said, "Give me an hour." He called back in 20 minutes. The email belongs to a woman named Mara Elridge. She rents a mailbox at a shipping center on Dame Street. Also, and don't ask me how I know this quickly, she posted 2 days ago in a local barter group, looking for quick cash loan. Will repay Friday. Friend can transfer me funds. A friend. Iris loves to call people friend, the way other people say cousin or neighbor, an elastic designation that makes her life feel safer than it is. I looked at the pieces on my table, the bank printouts, the police report, the notary's near miss, the rehab administrator's confirmation, the barter group screenshot Owen had texted. Each was an object that revealed not only what had happened but what was intended. Iris had not made a mistake, she had made a choice and then tried to stabilize it with a scaffolding of good intentions. I wrote it all down in a calm hand. I printed copies and placed them in a blue folder. On the tab I wrote, "Evidence." I tucked the original bank statement back into my notebook, now creased and imprinted with the marks of a day that had grown heavy. When the light fell in slanted bars across the living room, I turned on the lamp my father had fixed once, its cord wrapped in black tape like a healed artery. The apartment glowed the way it does on winter nights when the city goes quiet under new snow. I stood by the window and watched pedestrians negotiate their reflections in the glass. Then I sent Iris a message, "Come by tomorrow at 6. We need to talk. Bring yourself alone." I set the table like I was expecting a decent conversation to sit down with us. 2 mugs, 1 plate of lemon cookies I'd bought for the look of generosity if not the taste. The blue folder sat centered, solemn as a guest of honor. At 6 on the dot, Iris arrived with her hair pulled back in an apologetic braid and her hands empty. She looked like our mother in a photo taken the day the car wouldn't start, jaw set, eyes tired, still beautiful in the way light forgives. I opened the door and stepped aside. She slipped off her shoes and stood in her socks like a child waiting to be told where to place her guilt. "I made tea," I said. "Tea means I'm in trouble," she answered, but she smiled a little. I watched her clock the folder. Her face flickered. She sat. I slid the bank printouts across to her. "This is what happened," I said. I showed her the device nickname from Maria's printout. I set the police report down where I couldn't pretend not to land. I placed Tansy's confirmation and the barter group screenshot like evidence markers. I said nothing about the notary, some cards you keep until you know why you'll need them. She raised a hand as though to push away a light that was too bright. "Aveline." "No narrative first," I said gently. "Just facts." She nodded. She looked at her own name on the device log and winced. She touched the police report with the tip of a finger the way you test a burn. "I didn't want to drag you into it," she said. "I wanted to be the hero this time. I thought, if I took the money and fixed it before you noticed, then when I told you about Lena after, it would be a story with a good ending and you'd be proud of me." "I would have been proud if you had asked," I said. "Instead, you asked my account." We sat in the careful quiet of people who love each other enough to not shout. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Somewhere upstairs a neighbor practiced scales on an old piano, the high notes going shy, the low ones confident. "Here are the terms," I said, and I felt my voice move from sister to steward. "The bank will likely reverse the transfers to the 9407 account and the Zelle payment. Sunfield is a separate problem. If the deposits are truly non-refundable, then you and Lena will be responsible for those. I'm giving you a written restitution agreement for what the bank doesn't recover, payable in monthly amounts you can manage but that I won't forgive if you miss. You'll also write a statement admitting you added your device without permission and initiated transfers. I will submit that with my fraud claim. If you refuse, I'll move forward with pressing charges. If you agree, I'll let the bank process run and hold off on criminal charges as long as you keep your side of the agreement. You'll also attend a budgeting class with me, next Tuesday night, 6 p.m., Community Center on Hill. You will not have access to my apartment unsupervised for a while. This is me loving you, and this is me protecting myself. Her eyes filled. She blinked, and a tear tracked down fast like a child who forgot she'd planned to be brave. That sounds like a court paper, she said. It could be, I answered. Or it can be us, and paper. She stared at the blue folder. I could see the fight inside her, the part that wanted to argue about intention, the part that knew the day had run out of exits. She reached for a pen. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush as though her hand wanted to get it all down before the part of her that edits for charm could interfere. She wrote her name and the date and the phrase, without permission. When she finished, she blew on the ink as if it were cake and she had wishes left. I'll pay the non-refundable deposits, she said softly. I'll figure it out. I'll sell the ring Marco gave me. It wasn't really paid for anyway. She laughed, small and old. He financed it through a place that eventually called me more than he did. Let me make one thing clear, I said. I believe Lena needs help. If Sunfield is good for her, I won't stand in the way. I am standing in the way of making my life the casualty. She nodded, her braids slipping. I understand. I hate that I made you do this. I hate that you had to be the adult for both of us again. Then don't make me do it next time, I answered. We signed 2 copies. I tucked one into the folder and handed her the other. She slid it into her bag with a care I hadn't seen her show towards paper since our school days when each gold star mattered like a small galaxy. When she stood to go, she paused by the door. I was going to put it back, she whispered, and I saw in her eyes the movie where she had already forgiven herself because the ending was tidy in that version. I did not tell her I believed her. I told her I believed she believed. Both were true, and only one would keep my account safe. After she left, I emailed Maria a scan of the signed statement and my police report. I filed an online affidavit through the bank's portal. I changed every password, turned on every lock a system could offer, and froze my credit with fingers that trembled only once. Justice, when it is quiet, feels like a house finally noticing it is on its foundation. The air inside steadies. A lamp burns warmer. Even the lemon cookies seemed less fake. The next morning, Maria called with an update. The Zelle payment is reversed pending investigation, she said. The 9407 transfers are on hold. We'll know about Sunfield in a few days. You did everything exactly right. I thanked her and hung up. Outside, the maple on Addison Street had turned all the way to copper, as if some internal decision had finally resolved. For the first time all week, I felt the floor under my feet as something that would hold. The reimbursement posted in pieces, as though the bank was returning my life one healed rib at a time. First the Zelle, then the internal transfers, each credit line a small white flag planted back on my territory. Sunfield was a loss I expected and absorbed. We folded it into Iris's restitution plan with clear monthly amounts and a clause that if she missed 2 payments, I would file on small claims and forward the signed confession to the detective whose card I kept paperclipped to our agreement. Iris didn't miss. She sent the first payment 2 days early with a note, for the house fund. For the day I'm not the reason you can't sleep. I read it twice, then put it in the folder behind her written statement. Paper was keeping us honest. We started going to the Tuesday budgeting class together, sitting in folding chairs while a woman named Ruth taught the Holy Order of Envelopes and the Sacrament of Emergency Funds. Iris liked the cash envelopes best, labeling them with a calligraphy flourish, rent, groceries, bus, Lena, like she could write herself into a steadier life using ink alone. On the 3rd week, she whispered, I didn't know I was allowed to be new at this. I squeezed her hand. Lena completed detox and started the hard, daily work. When she called to say thank you, her voice was different, thinner, ragged with humility, but there was a kind of clarity I hadn't heard since she was 16, making a paper crane for our grandmother and refusing the staple because the fold had to hold by itself. "I'll pay you back," she said. I told her to pay herself forward first, show up, keep breathing, let the days stack into something that stands. I moved my house fund to a new credit union with a manager who looked me in the eye and told me his mother would kill him if he didn't treat every woman like she was his sister's most important friend. I believed him. I set up two-factor with an authenticator that lives on a separate device I keep like a talisman. I made a tiny ceremony of it. I wrote the recovery codes on paper and placed them in the safe beneath my father's coffee tin of mismatched screws. Someday I might know which ones fit where. Sometimes at night, I walk my neighborhood and watch other people's lives lit up behind windows. A mother in a bathrobe putting a plant to bed by misting its leaves. A man practicing a speech to an empty couch. A teenager drawing with her whole body hunched protectively around the page. We are all trying to keep what we can. Iris and I learned how to talk without either one of us performing. It's harder, it's better. She stopped asking for small, easy absolutions. I stopped offering them. We discovered that the quiet after a truth doesn't have to be cruel. It can be spacious. It can be enough. On the first day of snow, a realtor called about a place on Larchmont, a little two-bedroom with a porch and a maple that had probably been planted by someone who didn't realize how big trees are allowed to get. I toured it at lunch, taking off my boots at the door the way I was taught to when entering someone else's story. The floors creaked like a polite reminder. The kitchen window framed a square of sky the color of a clean sheet. The second bedroom could be a studio, I thought. A place to keep the notebooks where I write the plans that rescue me, quiet line by quiet line. Back home, I took out the blue folder and removed the top sheet, the confession that had changed the route of 2 lives. I read it once more, not to hurt myself but to honor the exactness of the path we'd taken to get here. Then I slid it back and closed the metal lid of the safe. Before bed, I wrote a letter to the person I had been on the morning the envelope arrived. I told her not to be ashamed for believing the best of people. I told her to be proud for learning how to believe the truth more. I told her the house fund was intact and growing. I told her we would be okay, not because we would avoid harm forever, but because we had learned how to clean it from the bone and keep walking. In the morning, the kettle whistled and a gull's shadow crossed the sink, and everything seemed like it might be kind. I set my mug on the table and ran my finger over the ring it left, already a mark, already a memory, neither of which made the table any less mine. The mail slid through the slot and landed with its paper sigh. Another white envelope with my name. I opened it without dread. Inside, a simple monthly update. The numbers obedient and true. The house fund had climbed a little hill in the night. I stood there in the quiet kitchen breathing the warm, uncomplicated steam of tea and understood the lesson that had made itself at home in me. We keep what we protect what we love, and we love best when we remember the cost, and pay it with open, steady hands.